Who is the number one driver at Ferrari? Is Formula One just a series of curses? Welcome to Tinfoil Helmets, your occasional spicy hot take roundup of the latest F1 rumours, all with the almost believable conspiracy theories to back them up. Everything here is carefully researched for ours to make sure it is totally founded in logic, reason, and truth. Or not. Who knows? Should we go straight into have we got anything right?
I think we actually did get some things right this time around.
We did. Number one on the list is Liam is still in the car and does well.
I guess there wasn't much in doubt he was still going to be in the car. The does well thing was a bit suspicious, but I guess he was technically the top finishing AlphaTauri this weekend.
He was the top finishing AlphaTauri, but I think he did well. Apparently he was on a two-stop strategy, which I think, given that he was on a two-stop across the whole race, that's actually a pretty good position. And so credit for him. I think he may be outperforming expectations for someone who was denied the seat last year because apparently he wasn't good enough for F1 and they picked Nick instead.
It was nice to see him. I mean, P11? That's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. But let's not forget, this was also the race that we thought Nick DeVries really came alive and showed what he was capable of in Formula One. So,
indeed.
Monza is one of those tracks that's like very interesting. They were talking about this a little bit during qualifying of, Brundle mentioned that Jackie Stewart thought Monza was harder to drive than the Nordschleife, just because there were like so many corners at the Green Hell that like you can make up time in like any of them, but because there are so few corners in Monza and overall they're not complicated corners, like you have to get them exactly right. So it's very hard to get them exactly right. So it's a bit of a challenging track to drive in that sense of the imagination.
I see that. That does make a bunch of sense.
Yeah. When there's 140 corners, you can make up time in, 135 of them.
Well, if you go fast enough, you can make up times in the one straight too. So
yeah.
Next on the list, Leclerc re-signs with Ferrari at the beginning of the weekend, and then Ferrari are bad. No, but maybe it was Mercedes instead. I don't know.
Yeah, we should get half credit on this one because, really it was the Mercedes drivers re-signed, and I think both of them had kind of miserable weekends.
It was a pretty boring weekend, and they underperformed what they should have done. So, next one was Williams does really well, and we think about taking Logan off the watch list. I'm gonna say yes on this. I think they did pretty well. Logan came in 13th, which is pretty good.
He did get a 5-second penalty in the middle of the race for something I'm not sure we ever saw, but it was just like...
I had forgotten about that.
You just looked up and it was 5-second penalty for Logan Sargent. It's like, what did he do? We're not even watching anything going on.
But I still think nonetheless 13th was pretty good, especially if you had a 5-second penalty, because I'm pretty sure somebody was sitting right behind him.
Yeah, but we also said the Williams were going to be good at Monza, which actually struck me as very odd because at the very beginning of Q1, Ted was like, I think we'll see the Williams out in Q1. I'm like, Ted, this is Monza and that's a slippery car. What are you thinking? Go read your notebook, Ted. Go read your notebook.
So got half a point for that then?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Dry quali and dry race, yes.
It was kind of nice, but sad to see a dry race and a dry quali.
Oh no, I was very happy with it. I think it showed the real performance of all the cars and the drivers. It was great.
Yeah, definitely. And it was overall, I think it was a good dry race because we've had some bad dry races in the past, and this was at least a somewhat entertaining dry race.
Mm-hmm. Okay, last item on this list. What is the Dutch performance in the cross-country skiing in the Winter Olympics? We explicitly asked you listeners to write in, and nobody did. So we still don't know the answer.
I guess we'll have to wait until 2026 to find out.
Indeed, and so please tune in our 2026 special Winter Olympics episode to find out the answer to this question.
Preseason testing and the Winter Olympics.
So, next one, between race drama?
There was not much.
No, it was very quiet. Not a lot happened.
Daniel's going to be out for a couple weeks with his hands. I saw that he could technically return in Singapore, but they're saying that probably not Singapore or Japan because they're just so complicated tracks to drive, which I understand.
Yeah, sucks for him. George and Lewis re-signed at the same time. I was not expecting George because I thought he had another year on his contract. Interestingly for both of them, they signed until the end of 2025. Is this a hint that Mercedes is thinking of quitting the sport entirely and unsure if George is worth signing for a 3-year contract?
Yeah, I was kind of very interested about that too, because you think it's definitely, okay, it feels like Hamilton's last contract.
Yep.
The regs change in 25 or 26?
26 is the new year.
Yeah, so it definitely feels like either Hamilton's last contract or he's going to jump somewhere else for the 2026 regs.
Yeah, unless Merck fixed the car.
Unless Merck fixed
Before
the car.
then.
Before then, yeah, we don't know. Or it definitely also feels like maybe George isn't who they thought he was.
Indeed.
If there is a parallel to Alex Albon's appendix, it would be Lewis Hamilton getting COVID.
True. George did such a great job in such a great car because it was just a great car.
Yeah, that he did very well in Sakir, but he did like that the Sakir GP, what that was, which I liked that circuit. I want to see that again.
Yes.
The outer loop, that was awesome. But yeah, I think he did a great job, but maybe a bit overperforming.
I'm not willing to accept that because he's been pegged against Lewis basically ever since he got in the car. Like he beat him all last year, and he's been pretty level pegged this year. Last few week races he hasn't been good. The question is that because Lewis isn't driving to his performance, or Lewis is being matched in his performance because he's driving his wheels off it? I think it's mostly that Lewis isn't really trying that hard.
Yeah, but if Lewis isn't trying that hard and getting the measure of George,
yeah,
that's not a good look all around.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting in the fact that it was 2 years and not 3 years, but it also raises another question with McLaren and Ferrari and Red Bull making like 5+ year contracts for all their drivers that they want to keep. It still continues to be surprising to me. I still going to lean on maybe Merck's thinking of quitting the sport, but
yeah,
we'll find out.
I could see that as well. Then hopefully maybe Ross Brawn will buy the team again for $1 and we can have Brawn GP season 2.
That would be amazing. That would be quite fun. That would. With a Honda engine.
You know my favorite bit of Brawn GP?
Go on.
The chassis car number is 0001. As in, we're going to make 10,000 of these cars.
That he is so forward thinking.
Yeah.
And so positive. He thought it was going to happen. So he's still got a chance.
Not 001, not 01, not 0001. Oh yes, the 1,000-year Brawn GP.
Well, maybe they thought they could make more than one in a season. It's only 500 years. 500 years of domination. We never got to see whether they could do a second season. Other drama, Charles did an interview with the BBC on the subject of contracts, where he basically said, if you read it, he's like, I will always be in a Ferrari, I will never drive anywhere else. And I'm just like, oh, come on, Charles.
This is pretty much on par of what he's been saying, like, the last, yeah.
I know.
You definitely get the feeling sometimes of, like, we keep harping on about it feels like Charles is in an abusive relationship with Ferrari, and you definitely feel that sometimes of like, no, it's not me at fault, it's not them at fault, or it's not them at fault, it's me, I'm the problem, I can do better, they won't hurt me again.
Charles. One last item from Ferrari, I'm sure we'll talk about them in the race too, but Ferrari yet again give McDonald's free advertising with their livery. They pick the suits that make the people look like they work at McDonald's. I have no problem with that, but if you're going to do that, you should make McDonald's pay for it. As a second...
If you really want a thing you can never unsee is the German flag on the back of the car.
Oh, dear God. Yeah, no, now I see it immediately.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I hadn't seen that, but now I see it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Ferrari Uber alles. Here we go.
Yeah. My one last point on the livery is like it's the opportunity for Ferrari to make their cars bright yellow, and they don't because they're wimps, and it's really annoying. And someone told me, or I read it, or I heard it last year, it's in my head. Yellow is actually the official Ferrari color.
Yeah.
The Ferrari being red is an Italian thing, and I'm like, this is your opportunity, but no.
Is that the Italian national racing color from like way back when?
I believe so.
I thought it was blue, and that's why we had blue Ferraris for a little bit.
I have no idea.
No, France is blue.
Everybody's got blue somewhere.
Italian national car race color. Red. Yeah, that's why.
Yeah, see? But Ferrari's color is yellow. That's their thing.
It's true, yes. The US is blue and also white.
Interesting. And I assume the UK is green.
Yes, British Racing Green.
So much so they created a special colour for it.
British Racing Green is a very good green.
It does nothing for me. I have no particular love for that colour. Occasional segment to still have a job?
Let's do it.
Okay, number 1 on this list, Lance Stroll. Looking dicey.
Yeah, that I think his only saving grace this weekend is Alonso is also kind of nowhere.
Surely his true saving grace is he didn't get to drive in the car on one day because it was given to somebody else and it broke down, so he only got one free practice session. But I don't think that's an excuse for being that far down in the field.
If it was like a track that, they rarely go to or anything like that, yeah, I'd say like, yeah, sure, but like It's Monza. How many times has Lance been around Monza, like via an F3 car or an F2 car or an F1 car? Like, it's Monza.
Or per your point at the beginning from Jackie Stewart, it hasn't got very many corners. I know you got to get them right, but you don't have to really learn very many of them. You just go in a straight line all the way. How hard could this be? As demonstrated by Nick De Vries last year, who apparently drove a terrible car pretty well. So, yeah, great question there. So I think Lance still needs to be on this list because I think something's coming soon. I can feel it in my bones.
It definitely feels like this is coming to a T of something's going to happen. Because I think sadly we've reached a point where Lawrence has to be like, do I want my son to have a drive or do I want to win?
Logan Sargent, I said, dunno, not a terrible race, but per your point earlier, maybe he didn't really do anything to save his drive for next year.
I think the real question there is going to be is who replaces him.
I think that's pretty hard. It's going to be whoever wins the F2 championship. Federic Vesti, a Mercedes young driver, I believe is in the lead and won the F2 sprint race yesterday. I don't know what happened to him today, but maybe because Mercedes and they've got the engine and that's where they place them, so maybe that's what it's going to be.
Yeah, but there was a comment a couple months ago, I think, of Williams being like, we're not going to be a Mercedes B team with the drivers, so I think that's a little harder to say that he's going to get thrown in there, but it's definitely a possibility. It's not going to be it's not going to be like what George had anymore.
And I believe the next item on this list for a questionable job performance is from you. Would you like to lead with this one?
Yes, the Monza Police Department, or I guess what the Italian National Federal Police, however they...
Polizia Department.
Exactly. There was a little bit of some controversy that popped up on the Twitters, because I'm not calling it by its other name, of apparently on going on under the tunnel that enters the track, George, I think, overtook Alex by like going the wrong way on the road, and there was like no real reason to do it. And Alex thought the police should have talked to him about something, and the police were like, "Oh look, it's George! Hey!" And then so Alex was pretty upset about that, and there's some lovely shade at George of Alex actually goes and parks his own car and doesn't just hand the keys off to the trainer to go park his car. George is quickly falling down my list of like favorite drivers on the grid. He is quickly becoming my least favorite driver on the grid, between like his off-track seeming of entitledness and on-track seeming of entitledness of, I thought we were forecasted for a podium.
that was so bad last week.
Oh, and then this week was the hey, George, we think you should go like strat mode 6 or something, and it's like, can you see there's a car right behind me?
He also, when he was doing the press push after his re-signing his contract, he said he decided to re-sign with Mercedes to reward Mercedes for supporting him, which is just like, I get that there's a certain part that you want to be like loyal, but that's not how you phrase it, George. You don't phrase it like that. You listen to your engineer when he tells you to look after your engine, and you definitely don't drive on the wrong side of the road going through a tunnel. Psst.
I mean, it can always be the British defense of that's, I thought, the side we were supposed to drive on.
True, especially if he's driving in a place that he hasn't really driven before. I mean, normally he doesn't. Normally he just drives into people anyway. So what does he get?
That's true. You made an interesting comment there about the engine. I'm wondering how much of his engine going kaboom in Australia was actually his fault and not.
Anytime a car goes bang from a manufacturer whose engines usually are pretty reliable, the first question I ask is, has the driver been driving it correctly? Mercedes engines tend not to go bang. Ferrari engines go bang, so clearly no matter what the driver does, it's going to go bang anyway. Red Bull engines are pretty reliable, and they shouldn't go bang, and Max doesn't blow his engines up, but Perez does.
Yuki didn't get to the grid today.
Yeah, I think that might have been his drive shaft and or his gearbox, which arguably is also from Red Bull.
Yeah, he was stuck in gear or something like that.
Should we move on to the quali recap?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to start with Lewis, yet again, out in Q2. Whatever is screwing with his vibe, he needs to fix it because it looks ridiculous. He can't, for the sake of the rest of the sport, he can't keep being out qualified by George. I should be privileged that you get to drive with me, Russell. Not acceptable.
This does feel a little bit like Lewis signed a contract and then forgets how to drive for a week.
Yeah, indeed. And so hopefully, maybe we'll see Singapore. We'll get back Super Lewis.
I mean, he has put in some amazing laps in Singapore.
He has. George stated after qualifying that he was able to qualify so well because he accepted the car for what it was and did not try to get the best setup out of it. which I thought was a very weird way to say it. And I can't work out whether he's, again, trying to throw shade / manipulate against Lewis.
That's some wonderful, like, driver nonsense speak.
Yes, it is. I thought it was very strange.
Accepted the car for... I'm not even going to try to dig into that. I thought it was interesting, especially having watched the race now, of just how much I think the Red Bulls do not give a shit about qualifying anymore.
No, they don't. They really. I have a comment on that in the spicy hot take section for later. But yes, I agree, and I think it's fascinating.
There was an interesting stat that I'm just going to say now that apparently we've had 7 different lap 1 leaders this season.
Huh.
Which is insane to think about, that we're at like race 15 with Max winning 12 of them, or 12, or Max winning 12. No, it's a race 14, Max winning 12, Sergio winning 2. And we've had 7 different lap 1 leaders.
Piastri.
Sainz, Checo,
Yeah.
Max.
That's 4.
George? Didn't George stick it on pole?
No. Did he? I can't remember.
But either way, like, we've had 7 different lap 1 leaders, or at least leaders by the end of lap 1.
I think that's very curious. I think that's. I think it lends more into the weight that Red Bull don't do anything with their car for qualifying. They just, make sure it doesn't go bang.
I also think it's also Max is not trying to win the race on T1 lap 1.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, like, sure, go ahead, overtake me. I have really good DRS and everything else, and today was just an example of, sure, go ahead, lead the race. I'll just wait for you to screw up and then come screaming by.
As he does every week.
And then off into the distance.
Exactly.
So Aston and Alpine both had, like, no speed at all.
No, they did. I was very curious about what happened to Alpine, actually. I know that their engine's supposed to be down, but I feel like they were just...
That was their reasoning of, our engine sucks. See, FIA, we can't freeze the engines. The engine...
Oh, you see, they're just playing it. Was that your tinfoil moment that you mentioned before the show?
Maybe.
That they intentionally drove badly so that they could get a fix on their engine?
Yeah, I mean, I've said it before. I think having a horsepower cap and saying, just meet this horsepower however you can. If you need to, throw a heavier engine at it, go for it. But if you can do it with a lighter, more fuel-efficient engine... I think that make it very interesting, and at least have the car still be somewhat level, but also, like, there's still a clear advantage.
Exactly, I completely agree. Aston had no speed. I don't know what to say about it. I was expecting more from them, to be brutally honest. Especially after they had such good free practices.
I think it's also one of those things of, there are really no other tracks on the calendar like Monza. Maybe we'll see... I would say, like, maybe Vegas, but, like, we haven't raced there yet. And also it's a street circuit, so that's always just going to be a little different. But, like, there's really no other lap. Like, hey, just put no downforce on the car, or as little as possible, and see how fast you can go. And I'm wondering if that's just, like, the one weak spot of the Aston Martin. If they just knew they weren't going to be the best at Monza and dealt with it.
Yeah, they were so reasonable last week. They were on the podium, right, last week?
Yeah.
Yeah, so reasonable, and then it's just all disappeared. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Yeah.
All right, to the race.
Race recap. Let's start out with the sad moment of Yuki having his car go bang and smoke pour out of the cockpit on the formation lap. That really sucks.
Then 2 more formation laps after that.
I was watching it, saying, oh, they're going to get the car, maybe they can do it, no, they need to do it, and then they wouldn't let the engineers onto the track, and I'm like, somebody's car is going to go pop, and their wheels are going to go bang. But apparently they didn't, and we had no other retirements, so I was surprised by that.
Ocon retired.
Did he?
Yeah.
Well, that was a total non-race. I totally missed that happened.
Well, Alpine.
Poor Ocon. Well, there we go. Yeah. I thought, overall, for the race, before we get into all the details, it was a really scrappy race, and not in a good way. Like, you see races that, like, they get scrappy and they're all up inside on everybody and they're trying to get it. I felt this was not so much a war of attrition, but, like, people just getting tired and being done with it. You saw people locking up. You saw people ducking on the inside, ducking on the outside, then, missing it and going over the runoff, and then people intentionally just going over the runoff and then getting caught with it, and the people saying, oh, he pushed me off, when they were literally 30 feet away. Bunch of whiners.
Yeah, there's definitely some fun moments. I feel like maybe since Max parked it on top of Lewis, people have been a little bit less aggressive in turn 1-2 complex at Monza. I don't know if you were watching the Sky Sports broadcast, but it was very funny anytime anything happened in that first turn, because Martin was like, "Nope, that's all fine. It's always fine." And it just got to, I was watching it with a friend, and it just got to be like somebody could pull out like a shotgun and start shooting at the other driver, and Martin just be like, "Oh, well, turn one at Monza. These things happen. Like, it's all fine. It's just a racing incident." Like, that's how it started to feel for sure.
It was a little ridiculous, and I don't know. The thing that really got me was how close most of the cars were. Like, they were really close.
I think with how those curbs are set up in the turn 1-2 complex, that there were a lot of times where it's like, I can continue going inward, but I have no space, and it's just easier to cut out of the corner and, cry foul than anything else. So I think some of those curbs are a bit aggressive.
Yeah, but the drivers need to deal with it better. And I feel like they changed that corner for one of the other formulas. I think it was WEC, so that it didn't have the straight on bit and it had the grass bit instead. And I felt the grass bit was bigger than it is now. And so it discouraged you from taking that short line, because if you either made the sausage and hit it and bad things happened, or you had to go through the foam things because your brakes failed.
Yeah.
But this one seemed wider so that you could get through it. I feel like people took advantage of that, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all.
I don't know who did it, but I did notice that one of the foam things was flattened.
Oh, interesting.
After Charles did his no risk lockup on the last lap, I was looking at that runoff going, one of those foam things has been destroyed. So I don't know who destroyed the foam thing, but somebody destroyed a foam thing.
It's probably Perez, because he just kept driving through it all the time. Double 5-second penalty for Merck.
Yeah.
Bad driving by both of them, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah. That wasn't great.
I think Lewis's was the one that's like, it was a classic Lewis penalty situation, and I just don't know whether he doesn't know how to use his rearview mirrors or not. It was classic.
When I first saw that impact, I was convinced Lewis was going sideways, spinning into a barrier. I'm amazed he held it.
Yes.
I was like...
he was... just spot on car handling.
Yeah, I saw the bump and go, oh, here we go, late race safety car. Like, this is going to get interesting. And it's like, oh no, they're just continuing on. Oh, okay. And then Oscar Piastri ruined Max's day by putting on softs and getting a fastest lap. And that means Max has now dropped 24 points in the championship.
He's dropped 24?
Yes.
I assume in total.
Yes, as in the maximum amount of points that Max could achieve, he has lost 24 of them.
That's ridiculous.
He is he hasn't even dropped a race win. He's still averaging something like 25.2 points per race weekend.
Does that include the sprint weekend?
Yes. That's why I said per weekend.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, like he's averaging more than a race win a weekend. It's insane.
Ridiculous. On to Perez did more to put Daniel in Red Bull than anything else Daniel has done recently.
Yes, this is like, if I have a take from the weekend, this is it. Of that, Perez did more to put Daniel in the car than Daniel has done in the last 18 months. So if
other than binning it in free practice, why was your take there?
What do we know about Daniel Ricciardo? He is the last of the late breakers, right? And
true.
It took Perez so long to get around George and so long to get around Sainz. And he was trying to go around the outside every time, and he would break at like the 120, 110 meter board, and you just see the other car come like screaming up the inside and like still able to make the corner just fine. And he was clearly not like... He was not the last of the late breakers by any stretch of the imagination. He kept trying to go around the outside on George, and it wouldn't work. And then he finally said, oh, let me try up the inside, and that worked. And then he got to have to do the same thing against Carlos, and he kept trying to go around the outside and kept not realizing why it didn't work. And then he suddenly tried to chuck it up the inside and goes, oh, that works. So he doesn't remember what lessons he's tried to learn during the race, and he was braking so much earlier than everybody else.
I was watching that early braking and being like, what is going on? But I was reminded in the back of my mind, the little fairy came to me and said, but Perez has complained that he doesn't like the brakes in that car, and I reckon that has to be what it is. He doesn't like the way it brakes, and therefore can't cope with it. Whereas Max loves it because Max is amazing, and that has to be at least part of the reason behind why he kept doing that. But that lack of adaptation is really the make or break there for me.
Yeah, like I have no. What is a different F1 braking? Like how brakes grab the rotors? How do they grab differently? Is it like the travel of the pistons or something? Or
my understanding is it's the efficiency of how it works, right? And if it's predictable and linear in the way that it brakes, then it works. Then you can work with that. But when it's not predictable, you don't know how it's going to brake. So you don't get that linear response. You might get or maybe you want a non-linear response and you're getting a linear response, but how you put the pressure on it and how it goes through. It's interesting because all those pedals, it's brake by wire, right? There's no real connection with the thing. And so I'd have thought that if it's truly about the feel, you could fix that. But then you've got to have the correlation you've got to tie the feel to what actually happens. Otherwise you're just driving around in a sim car.
This is very much a I could be chucked in a race car and do just as good moment, but I'm thinking like, well, I've gotten off an airplane and hopped in a rental car that brakes differently from how my car brakes, and it takes a couple minutes to figure it out, but then you get it down pretty quickly. But I guess we're also not talking about the same sort of margins. But at the same point,
indeed,
at the same point in time, he's been in that car for 2.5 seasons now. Mm-hmm. Figure out how the car brakes, man.
It is interesting, and I think it's one of the paradoxes of F1 and people getting used to cars. And I think, Lewis sees a little bit of it, or you see a little bit of it with Lewis right now, is like, okay, so the car's the car, and, you have to work with the setup and learn to adapt to it. But Perez doesn't seem to be doing that, especially with braking. So
yeah, but this is one of those things that always seems to separate the good drivers from the great drivers. Like, as much as I like Sebastian Vettel as a person, I don't think he is one of the greatest drivers because he didn't really show that he could adapt to different cars. He was very good in that one formula, and that's about it. He had some wins here and there, but let's be honest, he never really challenged Lewis for the championship. And then on the flip side, you have guys like Schumacher, Lauda, Lewis, Max, who just can get the best out of any car they are in.
That's why I want to see Max in a new type of car. I want to see something radically different.
Well, I mean, he had some very interesting comments this time or around in the press circuits this week of he doesn't know how much longer he wants to do Formula One, of once you win a world championship, what more is there? It's cool, now you're just collecting numbers, but you've already done it. So it's nothing new and interesting. And it sounds like he does want to go do something else at some point in time. And let's not forget, he's been in Formula One for, my friend and I were talking about this, 9 seasons at this point in time. He's 25 years old and been in Formula One for 9 seasons.
He will know Pat at the end of 2028. It will come out in 2027 that he's just not going to re-sign because he's got all the things and he doesn't care anymore and he's going to leave.
Yeah, and I think there's some truth to that of what can you do? Get 7 world championships like Lewis or Mick, or Michael. That's cool and all, but it's I think if he were to quit today, we'd still regard him as one of the greatest F1 drivers of all time. Similar of
just like we do with Fernando, right? Fernando won 2 and is amazing, and we think he's great.
And Senna, there's the question of how much did Michael get to win 7 because Senna was no longer on the grid.
Indeed. Next item in the list.
Oh yeah, we're still talking about that.
We are. I thought Perez closed down Max real quick right at the very end, maybe in the last 5 laps. But you have added here, there's a note that Max had an issue?
Yeah, there was something that came out on there's Engine Mode Dan, who was a former Red Bull mechanic or something like that. And he was saying that, I think he also heard something he was listening to the team radios or something like that. And GP was kind of, hey, Max, bring it home easy. You have a 12-second gap, bleed some time. There was something of they didn't want the engine to go pop or something like that. Because it was, 43C today? So it was a little bit.
Yeah, it was pretty well.
Yeah, and I think, so he, had a small issue that they were just managing to be okay, well, we've got this sewn up, take 3 seconds off your lap time. You'll still bring it home with a good lead. And we won't have to worry about blowing up the car.
Interesting. Maybe grid penalty incoming?
Maybe. That would make Singapore more interesting.
It would, but he'd still win anyway. Liam moves ahead Nick and Daniel in the standings. I find this hilarious.
He did?
Less the fact that he's moved ahead of Daniel, but I find it hilarious that he moved ahead of Nick, who had, 10 races? 12 races?
Something like that.
12 races. Ridiculous. Classic Alex Albon defending. I think he did a great job. He's very good at that. And I'm surprised that nobody's got the measure of him yet.
It's very interesting that it looks to be that the strategy coming from Williams is pit Alex early, get him in free track, undercut everybody, and say, come past me.
And it works for them.
And it works.
It's great.
Yeah. The only thing that got past him was Lewis on different rubber. And, kind of bleeding into the next point of the McLarens had nothing.
Yeah, it was. They were nowhere. And they had a good free practice on Friday, FP2. I think Norris was second, I think.
Yeah.
In the total, in the thing. So clearly the car was not set up properly, or maybe the car just didn't have it in it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's actually, per your point about Aston, I do wonder whether there's something that there's something that they're borrowing from the other teams, e.g. Red Bull, in terms of design influence that they don't fully understand, that causes this outcome here. Although you could make a certain argument that Red Bull were not the fastest around this track. It's not that they ran away with it. Maybe towards the end.
I'd argue they ran away with it pretty well.
Yeah, fair point. I retract my point.
Like, the thing was that, like, both Max and Checo were able to follow the Ferraris very closely, like never getting out of DRS range. And then as soon as they did finally make their passes, Max, by just waiting for Carlos to burn out his tires and screw up, and Checo realizing he can actually brake later, they just left off into the distance. Carlos was out of Max's DRS range in a lap, if that.
Oh, less than that.
He put like 3 seconds into him in about 4 laps. Like, it was insane. And then once Checo got past, he put much more time into them as well. So I think it's one of those things of, but also it just goes fast.
It did occur to me as I watched that happen with Carlos, and the fact that they'd been trying so close right behind them and just were basically stuck until they could find somebody to make a mistake for them to get past. I did reflect on how everybody said that Merck used to design their cars to only be lead in the front. And while I don't think that's necessarily what Red Bull done, I think there may actually be something about the aero in that car that when it's in front, it's ridiculous. But when it's behind people, it's only just very good.
Yeah, I think there's still some dirty air, especially with what some of the regulations they changed for this season. But yeah, no, it's yeah. I mean, every car works better in free air, but yeah, they're definitely in a league of their own once they came past. But the fact that they could also follow, like if we remember back, the Mercs could not follow anything.
They couldn't.
You got in front of them and you could really ruin their race.
Exactly. Next item, where did the Astons go? I think the answer is nowhere.
Yeah.
So we kind of already covered that, right?
We did.
Okay. Charles doesn't know what takes no risk means.
I love this. This was awesome. Did you remember this bit?
I think I missed this.
So, like a lap to coming in to see the last to get the last lap, I would say checkered flag, but that's the end, and there's no white flag in Formula One. So coming in the bell lap, the last lap, there was a team radio that popped up where Javi was like, "Take no risks. We're happy with this position. No risks, no risks." And then Charles has like the biggest lockup going into turn 1, like trying to dive bomb Carlos, and it was just like, oh, okay, you take no risk. I get it.
I was really shocked by how hard they were going at that, and I felt that I wonder if something has changed at Ferrari, because I feel like every other race we've watched in the last year and a half, Ferrari would have been on the radio. It's like, hold station, or in fact, sorry, let me take that back. As soon as Charles got within even a striking distance of Carlos, it would have been move over, let Leclerc past. But no, they just let them go at it, hammer. Well, not let, but nobody's screaming on the radio for them to stop. So
it definitely felt suddenly like there can only be one Ferrari driver on the podium at Monza, and it's going to be me.
Exactly. If we can't take the win, we'll take a podium.
Yeah. Which, if we want to actually answer any of the questions we ask at the top of the show of who is the number one driver at Ferrari?
I think the number one driver is Charles, but the driver who is driving the fastest and most consistently is Carlos.
Who's leading in the standings?
That is an excellent question. I don't know.
As we Google this, because we always research things ahead of time.
Exactly. It's research for the most plausible information.
Results and standings. It's 117 to 111 in favor of Carlos.
See, no, number one driver on track, but the number one driver is Charles.
I mean, Charles is always the number one driver in our hearts.
He's not in my heart.
That's true, me either. He's a good driver, though.
He is a good one-lap driver.
Charles has had 3 retirements this season to Carlos's 1. That's interesting.
Which is a big switcheroo from last year where Carlos forgot how to drive a car past turn 1.
Oh, yeah.
Last item in the race recap, Toto had some comments about Wikipedia.
Oh, this was fantastic of Toto's comment on Max getting 10 consecutive race wins. That's only for Wikipedia. Nobody actually cares. We had 2 drivers that were fighting each other for, all the time we were dominating. It's like, yeah, you would have loved if Lewis got 10 in a row.
As I sent in text message, given half a chance, they would have printed up the T-shirts lickety split if there had been a Mercedes with 10 in a row.
Yeah. Did they do anything with Lewis's 100th?
No, but they did make special 8 Constructor Championship shirts.
Well, and that's even something more for Wikipedia.
Exactly. Why are you trying to win another one, Toto? Shouldn't this just be a hippie lovin'? Highly recommend for all the Toto fans out there, they should listen to Desert Island Discs. It was actually quite interesting to hear Toto.
There is definitely something going on with Toto of Toto not having the fastest car is a very different Toto than Toto not having the fastest car.
Oh, absolutely. And it's very strange. It's very strange.
No matter what you might think of Christian Horner, we always get the same Christian Horner, whether or not it's the fastest car or the least fastest car. And, so it's very interesting to then see that with Toto, who's really only ever been a team principal with the fastest car.
Indeed. Christian Horner wears a heart on his sleeve. It's just the same heart and may not be his.
Yeah.
Toto wears his heart on his sleeve and it's his.
I have to say, I really don't like the Mercedes communications director being our pit wall representative, because everything is just so polished and PR and communications directory. And it's not like Gunter of so what's going to happen with the Haas drivers? I don't know. They're terrible.
So you say that, but it is nice to hear somebody who has actually thought about how to present the message and have the right conversation. He clearly taught James Vowles, because James Vowles does a pretty good job for Williams when he's on the pit wall. But it's nice to hear that at least a little bit. Yeah,
but I don't want the polished answers of oh yes, this looks to be an optimal strategy for the drivers, and we hope Lewis can close it in on these mediums. Yes, he's going to have to do a little bit of tire management. I prefer the Christian Horners and the Gunter Steiners just being well, we're just going to go race a car and see what the hell happens. I don't know.
That's why we're here every weekend. We're here to race a car and see what the hell happens.
Or laughing at somebody's bad luck, which happens so much.
Oh, exactly. That's why we love F1.
And wait, before we get to TAS rumors, anything else you want to talk about on the race?
I don't think so. I thought it was, as I say, it was scrappy. And I didn't not enjoy it, but I also didn't, it left no special place in my heart.
Would you like to give it a rating out of 10?
7.
I'd go a 6.
Oh, spicy.
Yeah. It was good. And I guess maybe Zandvoort had the most overtakes of any race ever of all time in Formula One. So to go from that to a race to where people were kind of just holding station behind the people in front of them. And so it was a little bit of, I guess, slightly disappointing, but Ferrari have a 1-lap car and they put their 1-lap car in a good 1-lap position. And then the Red Bull went, lol, we only set up our cars for the races. Bye. And that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, I mean, but we've had more boring races earlier in the season, but for some reason, something about this race was just unsatisfying, and I can't quite quantify it.
I'm really surprised they didn't pull in Charles before Sainz to try to undercut Max.
Yeah, they didn't know what they were doing. They were so confused because I think they thought that they had the pace, and therefore they didn't have to think about it, but they didn't really have.
Yeah, and then Max went past them and went, "Oh, we don't have the pace."
Indeed.
All right, let's talk about any sort of crazy rumors and predictions we might have.
My spicy take, which we've kind of talked a little bit about, but is that Red Bull's choice to set their cars up for race day is what really hampers Perez. He did well today driving on the race, but he had to work for it. Max, however, is a brilliant qualifier. In fact, in some ways, like Lewis used to be, right? And so, irrespective of what that means for other teams within the team and why Perez keeps not quite being able to convert, is he can't qualify as well as Max. Not because the setup can't be driven there, but because of that bias towards racing. Max will just go wring its neck and go sort it out. And I think that's a disadvantage, and I do wonder what that means for anybody else that you place in that car, whether they'll be at exactly the same disadvantage.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, because I think in the old formula, the car was definitely a little bit more set up for qualifying than race pace, and they're just so dominant right now that like you just set it up for race pace, and whatever we get out of quali, we get out of quali.
Yeah, and they know that they're not going to be bad in quali. It's not like the car's going to be down in 10th. It's just not going to be. You have to work it to get it on pole, and I think you're right. When previous years they would have set the car up to easily get to pole and hope that they can just hold it throughout the race.
Just as a quick aside, Japan is still the earliest possible for Max to win the World Drivers' Championship. Qatar is still the most likely. If Max and somehow if Sergio has just an absolute pitiful Singapore or Japan, it could be shifted to the Qatar sprint race, which would be like the most thing to happen since F1 introduced sprint race, is somebody clinches the World Driver Championship in a sprint race. How terrible would that be?
I am now rooting for that.
Yeah, right?
I need that to happen.
Right. Constructors Championship, Singapore is still the earliest possible. If Merck have a double DNF and Red Bull score 44, the maximum 44 points, they'll wrap it up. But Japan is most likely based on averages.
Plausible predictions?
Are any of them plausible?
Well, I start with Lewis going out in Q1.
Well, that would certainly help the Red Bull Constructors Championship hopes.
Because Merck is coming up fast behind them. Are Merck second now?
I think they are. They've been second for a while. They have 273.
No, you're right. For some reason, I thought Aston Martin were ahead of them, but then I forgot about Lance Stroll.
For reference, Red Bull are at 583 points. Max Verstappen is at 364 points. Mercedes is at 273 points.
Wow. The reason I put this in here is I feel like the car is going to go very badly at Singapore because it's going to be bouncy, and it's going to end badly, and Lewis is going to end up getting screwed by something.
There's a new layout this year of Singapore too.
Yes, they've tweaked one of the corners, right?
Yeah, they're building a building or something and can't use.
Then I think George is going to get P3 in this race, just because.
With how you've written this, I read it as George pulls out of the race while in P3.
Oh, that would be amazing. I'd love that. But no, I think he's just going to get on the podium in P3.
We should put that in parentheses and just, have both options there of like.
Yes.
George exits the race while in P3. George gets a P3. Perez wins. That's a prediction.
Yeah, the reason I just say this is I feel like Max has to stop at some point, and it's a street circuit, and we know that Perez is the king of street circuits. So that's what I'm putting in there.
I'm still thinking, if Max keeps winning, I think he's going to win all the way to Interlagos.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I've got to hold on to something.
Vettel was saying he thinks they should go for 12 because he feels like 12 is somehow untouchable.
If you're going to go for 12, why not just go for the everything?
On the one hand, I would hate to see them win every single race this year, but like it would be so cool to see, of like just an absolute like pole to pole domination.
The question really has to be at that point: what will the stat quotas do? Because that's like basically actually Red Bull will be unbeatable. Then we need to wait for the driver to win every race. Because Perez won some this year, and then the stats people have nothing to talk about anymore. Like, there's no more stat that they can do.
The consecutive win record can keep going because you could do it across seasons.
True.
But as far as every race in a season and season win percentage, it could only be tied. It could never be beaten. It's like a 109-yard kickoff return in the NFL. It's a record that's only tied. It cannot be beaten.
Indeed. Next item on this list, I think Lawson is going to be announced that he's going to be in the AlphaTauri for the rest of the year, and that Danny needs more time for his hand to recover. What I didn't write here, because I didn't want to be a total Debbie Downer, I think this is the end of Danny's career. I think if Lawson gets stuck in that car for the rest of the season, Danny's never coming back.
I think that's fair. Personally, I'd like to see Danny in F1, or not F1, NASCAR. I think that would be absolutely fantastic for him.
Can he do that now with having to hold that steering wheel in that same position for so long with his hand? Is it possible anymore?
I mean, he's got two hands.
True. And I don't think you would need both of them in.
Says us who have never driven a stock car.
Exactly, never driven a car at that number of G's at the best of times.
I have a non-Red Bull winner. I don't think it's going to happen, but I want to try to be bold. And if anything, if there's any circuit where I think this could happen, I think it's Singapore, just because, if you get a safety car at the wrong time and then have to overtake, like they could be on the back foot. So I think it could, definitely... There could be some, and Singapore has been known to have some weather chaos for sure. So I think, you throw any of those races, it's the best chance for the rest of the grid to come even with the Red Bulls, because everything is going to be crazy. or everything could be crazy.
Do you have a prediction of who that might be?
Poetically, it'd be great if it was Fernando Alonso.
Yes, and the question there is, will Stroll crash?
That's the rumor. That's the tinfoil helmet moment of Lance Stroll, desperate to save his job at Aston Martin, crashes, allowing Fernando Alonso to get a better safety car pit lane in chaotic conditions, and he wins the race.
The only way that would be more perfect if it turns out that Flavio Briatore is at the race.
No, the only way it would turn out to be more perfect if it was all an accident and none of it was like scripted in any way. It just happens. That would be how it would be absolutely perfect. As if somehow we recreate Crashgate, just like with actually it all like being legit.
I give it a good chance that this could actually happen, but unintentionally.
That would be so funny. Oh, that'd be so good. Oh man, I love it. I'm now really rooting for that to happen. I'm going to put that in our notes of a legit Crashgate.
So as he types that up, I will read out Andrew's last prediction, which I don't think is very controversial at all. Is a time limit race, and given that it's Singapore, it's going to happen.
Maybe not, but yeah, I'm thinking we're going to hit the 2-hour mark. Because if you get any sort of rain or anything, I think it could hit the 2-hour mark.
Yeah, and I think rain is pretty likely.
This season, absolutely.
Anything else? Any more plausible predictions for Singapore?
Who knows when that podcast will come out?
Indeed, it's going to be fun because one of our team members, not me, will be traveling in a far-off time zone. Even further than the time zone I'm currently in, and we'll have no idea how we're going to make it work. But we will make it work because we are committed to you, our loyal listeners.
I mean, you can record your half on your own, and I'll record my half on my own and just splice it together in the edit, right?
Oh, dear God. It already takes me so long to do the edit. I'm not... No.
Once again, thank you for listening to Tinfoil Helmets. We are always waiting your feedback if you have any for us, or you just want to compliment how good of an F1 podcast this is. Feel free to write to us in at feedback@tinfoilhelmets.com, or because we know that most of you just know us, send us a text. We'll read that too.
No. I want an email. Somebody
you want an email?
Send a legitimate email.
All right, a legitimate email. We want this email to have purpose. We have a domain. Let's use it. Feedback@tinfoilhelmets.com. And also, don't forget to tell your friends to listen, like, rate, and subscribe, because we weirdly want more listeners on this thing. I think it's been fun.
I think it's fun. I'm enjoying it.